Hi guys, Happy New Year and welcome back to this new tutorial of our series Blender for Production, 2D and 3D tracking in Blender. My name is Helga Maus from pixeltrain. I know that many of you are waiting for 3D camera tracking and solving, and I'm really happy that you followed so far with this series to learn the fundamentals of tracking and 2D tracking inside of Blender. You will see later in 3D tracking that's extremely important that you understand how 2D tracking works, because everything which is quality about a 3D camera tracking is depending on your 2D tracks. So it's really important that you understand all the concepts and tricks and you have enough practice in 2D tracking. In this last lesson now of the 2D tracking world, I want to talk with you about some important topics if you have shots where trackers are disabled by occlusions and things like that. So this time we want to talk about enabling, disabling tracks by hand or re-enabling tracks later. We also talk about techniques how to join tracks and average tracks, and also we talk about offset tracking. So I hope you find something useful in this tutorial here. If you want to support me, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want to work exactly with the same footage here, you find this footage in my Patreon, also with the lowest tier, and on my Gumroad for a really small fee. See it as a thank you for these tutorials. So let's get started here. We go again, like always, in the VFX template here, and we load now our footage. So feel free to use your own footage if you don't want to use my footage here. And this time I used here from my folder offset and joining here this scene here, zum anderes, and I took a part of that. I took frame 150 to frame 300 here. So let's load this image sequence now here and make all the settings we normally do. So let's go, like always, into the color management, make this here standard. This footage is made with 25 frames per second, so let's set that. Then we load the whole thing after we clicked here set scene frames. So you see that the frames are now shifted to the beginning. So Blender is here really clever. So it moves the frames to 1 to 151. Then we can prefetch the whole thing here. And let's go into our timeline here, into the playback settings, and set the movie clip editor synchronized with the rest. So we can now scrub here and also here, and both windows now are synchronized. So this is the shot. Let's play it a little bit and talk about what we want to do. You see, this is a handheld shot. So you have good features here, a little bit of shaking here. But what we want to do is now we want to prepare tracks here on this dark house here, and especially here inside of the windows or around the windows. And the problem with that is this pole here in the front, which will wipe away your trackers, and you don't have the chance to track every point here over the whole time. So that's the idea of this shot here. So let's try what we can do and how we can do it. So I go here to the first frame, and then we make our track settings here. So these are the defaults which we want to use. The motion model, I think affine would be good here. Then we go to normalize. I go into the correlation settings, set it to 90%. Okay. And now we can add our first tracker, and let's analyze again really fast. What I want to do here is let's take this window here as an example, and I start here on this corner here. So a little bit like our last tutorial where we used the sign here. So control click here, and then we go into our track window, make it a little bit bigger so that we can see better what's going on. Okay. And in the tracking settings, we change the speed here to real time, so to see better what's going on. L key for locking, Alt S to check here the search area. And a good tip here for checking if the search area for frames is good is if you have something like that here, you will see in the next frame here, it will still be the pattern here inside of this area here. And you see we can go 4 frames here to the right until it reaches here the border. So for this speed here, this search area is absolutely big enough. So Alt S again to get rid of that. And let's track, because I know I will lose this point here in a moment. So I don't go in here with Control T. I make it here really step by step. And you see, we now come close to this pole. And to squeeze out some more frames, what we can do here is we can change here now the pattern. So that's more on the right side and not on the left. And you see that our reference point still is at the same point. So that's a way of squeezing out maybe some more frames here, because you will see later in production that really often you don't have too many trackers to lose. So we try to really keep that point. But now we are at the point where we say, yeah, now we can't do anything more. If you let Blender track that, Blender really often disables the track, but at the point before it disables, really often we get a little bit of sliding, because suddenly something of the occlusion here comes into this pattern area. So be aware of that you maybe have to go a little bit back and delete everything which is on the right side or the left side here. To do that, you learned that we have here these buttons. You also can use your pie menu, the E key on your keyboard, to clear the track to the right or to the left. Or you can press Alt T to clear, for example, to the right. I don't do that because I have managed to come until this point here. But in the next frame now here, I want to disable it. And you see, it's disabled. So if you have a tracker which has no data at all, it's disabled by default. But what if you have now something like that here, and you want to disable it exactly in this frame here? For this, you can use a keyboard shortcut on your keyboard, which is Shift D. Shift D is toggle. It disables and enables tracks. And you see it here in the curves that we have to stay here over the window, that this curve segment here is now vanishing. You can also disable a track here by this eye symbol here. So that's the same thing. So now the track is disabled and it's not contributing anymore to a solve result or something like that. But we know that we need this information later. So what can we do? There are several approaches we can go. The first approach now is that we make a new tracker. So let's go here to an area where we suddenly can see the window corner, for example, at the end, because now this corner is back here. And what we do now is we track backward. So Control click here, try to find the same point here, which we had before. And now we can track backward. And this time I'm a little bit lazy. I track now automatically back. Control T would be tracking forward. If you press Control Shift T, it goes backwards. And now you see, yeah, we track now automatically. And now we lose it. It's disabled again. Let's check. I said that really often we have a little bit of drift at the end. So let's check that. So we are quite close here. And if we now go 1 frame to the left, you now see that the pattern here is suddenly touching here this pole. And you will see that now this pattern here is moving. So what can we do now? We can press the G key. We can correct the point here. And then we say, okay, this is the last frame. We want to kill everything which is on the left. So E key, clear track path, and everything is killed now here. So now we have the same point here 2 times. And it's nothing wrong with that. But the problem later, for example, in a 3D track or 3D solve is that for a solver, it's extremely important to understand the scene. So 2 trackers, which are representing the same point, but the solver doesn't know that's the same point, do not give enough information about this point to the solver. But if the solver knows that this here is exactly the same point, we only have a gap here, the solver can work with this data. So a good habit would be now to connect these 2 data streams again. To do that, it's quite easy. you select both of these points here, which are the same here. You also can go here, select this here, because here you see it. Then we go here, we see, oh yeah, that's the same guy again. Shift, click. Now both of these trackers are selected. And then you can press Command J, like you also do in geometry, for example. Or we can go here into the track menu and select here join tracks. And the moment you do that, both trackers are vanishing. We have a new track here, track number 1. We say this is the left corner. And this here is now the same tracker. And we see this gap here, and this gap is nothing else than a disabled tracker. You see, that's the idea behind that. And so, after learning that, we can now try to do that here manual by ourselves. Let's check. Yeah, we can use this point now here. We go now to this side, Control click, make our adjustments. I press Control T to track this point. We are gone. Let's go a little bit back. Here, for example, that's the last valid frame I want to use. So let's get rid of the rest here. And to make it more obvious here, I click here, show me only the selected curves. You see, this is the data we now have, nothing on this side. And now what we can do is I scrub now until we see this point again in all its glory. Here we are. Now we can track it for 10 frames or so. And what I now do is, instead of making a new tracker and then join them, I take now our existing tracker, which is still disabled. You see it's disabled here. Press the G key. And I move now the tracker back where it belongs. We say it belongs here. And the moment you do that, you initiate a new keyframe here. And now I can press Control T again. And you see it tracks. I think the pattern here was a little bit too close to this pole. So let's go a little bit back and change that here so that we don't touch anything. Let's delete everything to the right only to make sure, and then Alt arrow keys until we come to the end. That's it. Now, we stayed in the same tracker here, but we now have a disabled area here. So that's the whole idea behind enabling and disabling trackers here. After we have now seen how to join tracks, how to enable and disable tracks, what if we have now enabled a tracker again, but we are not so sure that the point is exactly where we left it? For this, Blender also has a nice functionality. Let's take another point now here. Let's go here and check what we can do. And what I want to do is I want to take this point now here, so the left top corner. Let's go to here to the first frame. And I now click here, make it a little bit smaller. Command T. Yeah, we know that it breaks. We go a little bit back. And yeah, let's say this here is a better frame. Track 1, 2 frames here. Maybe we squeeze out a little bit more. Yeah, and now I think that's okay. I go one back here, delete everything to the right. Shift D, disable this guy. And now we wait until we see again what's going on. So, left top corner. Here is the flag in the front, but now we have here our point back. So let's press the G key and move now this guy into position. But now I do something interesting. I'm a little bit lazy. I don't really know which point here was now in the last keyframe. And this is something you have to really make accurate to don't destroy your result. And there's an interesting functionality inside of Blender which can help you. So we know here that this here was the last keyframe. We now have here a position somewhere close to it. And if you now go here to the tracking panel on the left, so if you don't see it, T key, or you can also, I think, go here and try to find it here under track refinement. What you now can do is you tell now Blender, please try to refine this track here. And we can do it in two directions, to the front and to the back. And we want to go to the front, so I click here. And now you see Blender moves now the pattern back where it belongs. So it uses the data of the track and the keyframe before to do that. And this helps me now for this tracker. And now I can track to the end. So this is refinement here. So you can decide in which direction you want to have it. So let's also lock that here. Control L was locking. So lock them here only to make sure that we don't destroy them later by accident. Now we have 4 of them. And the last thing I want to demonstrate you now here with this idea here is the so-named offset tracking. And offset tracking is a little bit of a dirty technique. It helps you if you try to get some data where you normally don't get data, but I find in production, also in other applications, that offset tracking really injects problems later. It's never 100%, but yeah, it's useful. So let's try to understand that. For this, we take maybe this window here. And what I want to do is, let's select these 3 here and press the H key like hide to get rid of them in the viewport so that you can see what I'm doing now here. I want to track this point here. So Control, click here, and we want to track now this guy. I use Alt and the arrow keys, and we track here now. And you see we come now close to this pole again. So as always, we try to squeeze out everything which we can. And maybe, yeah, now comes the point where we say, now we can't go any farther with this pattern here. Yeah, we are losing then the shape too much. So what can we do now here? If you need now this position also in this area here, if you disable a tracker, you don't have data in this gap. You have seen that before. It's really a gap. But you say, we need now the data where this point here is, also where it is approximated here behind this pole. You can now make an offset. To do that, you use the G key like grab, but this time G, G in sequence. You press 2 times the G. So G, G, and now you can see you can move now your pattern area around without moving the reference point, which you get as the result. And the idea here is now that you search for something which is on the same perspective plane. And this is the hard thing about that, because you have seen the movement. Nothing is 100% on the same plane here, but we can say nearly. So we can say, let's take, for example, this pattern here and track this point here a little bit, because it takes longer to come to the pole, and it transfers its data like a parenting to this point. Let's try this. Alt, right arrow, and now you see it works. Yeah, we are moving now the point behind the pole, and it says if this point here is moving in this direction, this point will also do the same thing. And then we come maybe to a point where we say, yeah, now we have to squeeze here more information out. And yeah, maybe then we are come to the point where it's not possible anymore. So press the G key again, and we say, let's try this point here. But you see what happens. If I only press G, I mean grab, this is something I don't want. I escape it again. You have to make an offset again. So G, G, and now you see you can move this guy around without breaking this connection. So I go now to this point here, and I correct that. And I move this guy in again. And now we are again at this point, where we say, complicate. So GG, let's take this point and try to get some more frames. And now you see we are nearly through. So don't go into these areas. So the shift would be too much, I think, something you have to test. So let's GG again, go here. It's really far away, but let's check. And now you see what I told you. I go a little bit back here and let's take here this point, correct that a little bit. Now I press only G to correct that, because I really want to correct this point here. And if you press G, you correct this point to the same time like this point. So now we are really coming out here on the other side. Let's check that, and yeah, we are quite good here. You see, due to the fact that this is a wall, it works somehow. We are really nice here, but you see now we don't have a gap here. How to get now this here back to this point? Because now we can track this point again. So that's much, much better. So what I normally do is I go here to a point where I say, yeah, now the pattern is quite safe. For example, here. And then you find here in the track panel, if you go down, 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 here a marker area. We talked in one of the first tutorials about that. And here you see the position of this point here. And underneath that we have the offset. So this is this offset line. And what I now can do is I can zero out this offset again. And now we are back on track here. And we can now shape our pattern like we want and track hopefully to the end. So this is offset tracking. Sometimes it works because the perspective is really close to the rest, but sometimes it doesn't work, and this is something you also can have. So let's bring back all our trackers here. So Alt H, or you also find that here under show hide tracks clear. It's named here. And now we see all our tracks here. Okay, so now we have seen that here. I want to do now a last thing here, and then I will close the whole thing. So let's get rid of our new tracker here. First lock it and H it to get rid. We have here 3 trackers, and you have seen with the help of the offset tracking or to join tracks and so on, you get trackers which sometimes have a gap, or like you've seen here with offset tracking, you don't get a gap, but maybe the tracker is not so accurate. There's an interesting function here now, which you can use to bring all the data of the tracks together. So if I select now all these 3 tracks, I activate now here this function again, and now I bring all 3 trackers here into the selection. So shift click, you see that not all of our trackers are seen here all the time. We have gaps here. For example, this tracker stops here, this tracker stops here. But between that, we still have information from other trackers. And what you now can do is, because you need that, for example, for later masking or for other information, you can say, I want to have a construction of a new tracker, which uses the data of all 3 of these here. So you get a tracker which lives forever, over the whole time. To do that, you only have to select the trackers which you want. So for example, these 3 here. And then we go here to the track menu. There's an average track here, or you go here to the track menu and you see here under join tracks, average tracks. And if you now do that, click, you get a new tracker here, and I name it directly average, so that we later know what's going on. And now you see, if we only have this average track selected, you'll see that I clicked that here. We have now information in all frames, because this here now takes together all the information of the tracks here. The point itself here doesn't make too much sense, you see, but we have information here, and this here is the midpoint of these 3. So sometimes quite useful to use something like that here, because you can now take all this information together. Okay, that's it for today. I hope this helps you in your daily work. If you have questions about these techniques, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for all your comments you gave me. Sometimes you correct me in something. I enjoy that really. Sometimes I do something because I have an intention to show you in feature and I don't see then the more obvious way. So it's nice to have a conversation with you. If you like these tutorials, like I've said, please like them, subscribe them, share them. So see you in the next lesson about then finally camera solving and 3D tracking. Your Helge Maus.